This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 261 of the GardenDC podcast. Can carnivorous plants hurt people? Well, only by depleting your pocketbook. In this episode of GardenDC, we talk with Ethan Kamerow of Cultivate the City all about carnivorous plants. The plant profile is on Mexican bush sage, and we share what's going on in the garden as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on the many ways to use pumpkin by Christy Page of Green Prints. By the way, I'm a big fan of Halloween, and as this is our special spooky holiday episode, I'm going to share my favorite frightening plant. Be sure to listen to the end of the episode for that. This episode, we're joined by Ethan Kamerow of Cultivate the City. Welcome, Ethan.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. And Ethan, we're going to talk all about carnivorous plants and those scary garden creatures for spooky season. But before we dive into all of that, we like to ask our guests here at the GardenDC podcast, were they born with chlorophyll in their veins and a green thumb?
I would say I definitely was not. I've killed my handful of plants in my lifetime. And I do like to tell people that they always get discouraged when they kill plants, but I feel like everyone I know that is really good at growing plants has killed a good amount of plants. You got to kill some to learn how to keep them alive.
Very, very true. I think you're not a true gardener until you've killed, at least 100 plants.
Yeah, I feel like I'm over 100 at this point.
So tell me a little bit about how you got to Cultivate the City. And for longtime listeners of the podcast, they might be familiar with the name Cultivate the City because we've had the owner of Cultivate the City, Niraj Ray, on the podcast before talking about unusual edibles.
Yeah, so I've been in the plants pretty much my whole life. As a kid, my family had an herb garden and we grew hot peppers and stuff. So plants have always kind of been in my life on and off, sometimes more drastic than other times. But I met Niraj through Facebook Marketplace, buying plants actually, carnivorous plants to be exact. And then I went a few years back, I think 4 or 5, when he had his rooftop garden in DC. I met him the first time there, and we kind of traded and sold plants back and forth for a little bit. And then kind of towards the end of the pandemic, I was kind of not happy with where my job was, where I was at before that. I reached out to him to see if he had any openings for a job opportunity. And he was like, yeah, come on, we can try it out. And if you're a good fit, we can get you a job with me with Cultivate the City. He sold carnivorous plants, but that's not what he was like obsessed with. He was really into edible foods. But I think he had an interest in them, and he knew that that was my thing, was carnivorous plants at the time, and still is. So I think he thought it was a good fit, and we kind of got along since, and I've been working with him for I think about 4 to 5 years now.
Nice. And for our listeners, can you describe where Cultivate the City is based?
So we're based out of DC. For a little bit, we were sharing a greenhouse in Silver Spring, but right now we're actually in the middle of a move back to DC. And I think we're going to be building a greenhouse on some land he bought. So we'll be able to do things exactly how we want to and set up all these cool edible gardens and I think we're even going to set up a little bog garden for carnivorous plants to show people how they grow outside in this area. Because I think a lot of people think they're all tropical, but you can definitely grow some in our area.
And for people wanting to purchase from Cultivate the City, while you're in transition, I know that I see Niraj at various gardening festivals and events, but how else can they purchase from you all?
You can contact us through Instagram or our website. Our Instagram is Cultivate the City. Our website is cultivatethecity.com. That's usually the best way. Or if you're in any of the plant groups on Facebook, the local DC, Virginia plant groups, we're pretty much always active on there. You can also find us on Facebook at Cultivate the City, and we do have posts up on Facebook. You can kind of see some plants we're selling.
And those are all kinds of plants, as Ethan was saying. Niraj is a specialist in unusual edibles, but also houseplants and other plants.
Mm-hmm. We enjoy trying to grow plants that you can't find other places too easily.
Mm-hmm.
It's a competitive market, so we try to do things that are a little bit different.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the selection for Cultivate the City are the high end, I would call them houseplants, or rarer houseplants that
Yeah.
not everybody has.
I like to call them collectible houseplants.
Collectible, that's a good term for them. I think they're the ones that are sometimes harder to grow, not the
Yes.
easiest houseplant, but they are coveted. How's that?
Yeah, that's a good word. Perfect word for it.
So it's always nice to look at some of that selection.
Yeah, they're beautiful plants.
So what drew you personally to carnivorous plants?
Well, I've always been into plants just by how adaptive they are, and they really do want to live, even though we all kill them every now and then. But they really kind of do what they have to keep surviving. And I've always found it amazing that carnivorous plants in the wild, instead of just their species dying off, they evolved to be able to consume like bug meat and bug material and things like that. Um, I just find it fascinating in that some of them move at like or Venus flytraps, and they're just really cool looking as well. I find everything about them pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I think people who collect carnivorous plants or who are interested in them, they're first attracted, the one you hear about first is the Venus flytrap
Hmm.
because it does have movement to it. Like when you touch that kind of the outer rim, it will close. So we'll get into that in a minute, but I first want to talk about some myths of carnivorous plants. And you had alluded to one already, which is that they're all tropical because they kind of do look, crazy,
Yep.
alien, out of this world. They're not the ones you just stumble across in a regular perennial garden. So that makes people think they're not native when actually most of them are native to the mid-Atlantic US.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, since they look so crazy, they think, oh, they must be from the Amazon or somewhere far away from here. But yeah, Venus flytraps is a perfect example. It's the most you see. You always see them in Home Depots and stuff. But they're endemic to North and South Carolina. That's the only place you can find them growing naturally. There are other colonies further up the East Coast, but they have been planted by people. But those Sarracenia pitcher plants are another one that are temperate and that can live in our area. And there are also sundews that are different species of sundews that are temperate as well. So a lot of these grow really well in our winters and stuff. Sometimes you do have to baby them a little bit, but I mean, sadly, our winters have been not as cold as they usually are. So it's really effortless as long as you have the right setup and guided the right way.
Hmm.
One thing that does bug me is Home Depots and stuff. I feel like Venus flytraps are always advertised as houseplants, which they're very difficult to grow inside because they need about as much light as a tomato plant would need, about 12 hours of direct sunlight. And people try to grow them inside, and obviously they can't give them that, and they die, and people get discouraged. And I feel like that turns people away from these plants when it's really just slight tweaking of where you're growing them you have to do, and they'll thrive.
Yeah, it's a great point, Ethan. Unless you have a grow light on them, that 12 hours of light is just not going to work. And
Yeah.
yeah, you always see them sold as a hobby house plant, like a cute little thing in like a cup
Yeah. I think
and, with barely any instructions, if anything, on a tag.
Yeah, in the carnivorous plant community, the cups they come, we call them death cubes because they're definitely going to die in those cups. They get too hot in those little cups, and they really don't need a whole lot of humidity. That's another misconception. A lot of people think these plants need super high humidity in their terrarium plants when
Hmm.
they're not. And there's even some plants that really do not like the humidity.
Yeah, I think that's a good myth to point out because I would think that would be a great place to put them is in like a glass terrarium.
That's what I did as a kid. I set up a fish tank and I got all these plants, these temperate plants, and set them up in a tropical environment inside my bedroom. And they lasted about a month before they slowly started dying, each one.
Yeah, and they do slowly die. I've
Hmm.
had that happen. I've had a couple sundews on a windowsill that I kept, and yeah, it's not a quick death, but
No.
it's a slow, you're like, that doesn't look like it's doing as well, and then it
Hmm.
kind of peters out, which is sad to see. But
Yeah.
let's talk about some of that ideal conditions. So where would a Venus flytrap be growing naturally? What does it love?
So naturally, they'll grow in a bog, which is in some way similar to a swamp, but not really. So a bog has a moving water table underneath the soil. So it's constantly moving all the minerals and nutrients away from the soil. So in a bog, you'll see no trees. It's typically a lot of grass. And then if you're lucky, you'll find some carnivorous plants. But that's what they grow in. And since there's no trees, they're getting hit by the sun, like I was saying before, about 12 hours at least a full sun a day. So they're getting blasted by sun. The soils are always wet. They're always moist or to pretty much soaking wet. And that's really what they like. They don't like any nutrients or low mineral content in their soil.
So they're used to just having the barest of anything in that water.
Hmm.
So I think that's one of the things I noticed for success with carnivorous plants is if you use tap water, that's like death.
Yeah, that's something you want to stay away from. Some plants are a little more forgiving, so I tell people when they're getting their plants, try your best to always use distilled or rainwater or reverse osmosis water for those people who have fish tanks or something. And all those waters are pretty much water that has very low to zero mineral content in it. Like distilled is zero minerals in it. And that's the most ideal water to use. But I tell people if they're running out their house and they see their little sundew on their shelf is bone dry, it's better to then use city water, but then later that day flush it out with distilled RO water or rainwater to flush all those minerals out.
Hmm.
But then there are
Yeah.
some plants like Pinguicula or one that really don't like to ever have that water. You kind of have to learn which ones are a little more forgiving than others, but all of them prefer rain or distilled water. And you definitely, if you do use normal water, you need to flush it out. Otherwise, they will slowly die over a few months.
So obviously not salt water,
Mm-mm.
even if it's natural, we want just distilled, no chlorine, nothing. And if you're in the DC area, we used to be able to let our tap water off gas the chlorine, but that's no longer the case. The way the chlorine is added to our water, so you definitely should invest in probably distilled water.
Yeah. And another thing when I teach these classes, I get a lot of two questions actually with the water is one, if they leave their tap water out overnight or something like that, will that make it better? And that will actually concentrate it even more. So it will make the mineral levels in the water even higher. So that's worse than just going straight to the pot from the tap. And the second one is people ask if they can use their dehumidifier water, which that water is safe. It's very low in minerals, but you have to make sure your filters on your dehumidifier are pretty clean. Otherwise, you can spread fungal infections and things like that.
Hmm.
So the safest way is just rain or distilled water.
And any advice on if you're collecting rainwater, the type of vessel to collect it in, like plastic jug versus metal?
I would say plastic. Um, I've never collected metal. I don't know if metal would leach out any kind of
Hmm.
things into the water, but I'd assume plastic's probably safest. And then I also tell people you can buy a little water tester, a ppm, which stands for parts per million. Usually at Walmart, they have them definitely on Amazon. They're about $5. And it's an easy way to test your mineral content in your water. And it should ideally be 50 parts per million or under.
Okay. So carnivorous plants are basically sitting in running water at their root zone, is what you were saying.
Hmm.
So can you create a moving water system, or is it okay that you're just flushing water over them when you're watering them once in a while?
I think it's okay. I recommend the best way to do it is setting your pot in a small dish of water. So maybe if you have like a 6-inch pot, it's sitting in an inch of water or so.
Hmm.
That's what I like to do. It's the easiest. If you're watering, if you're not doing like that and you're top watering, you're gonna have to be doing that every day, which just kind of becomes a hassle. So setting it in water is the best way, and then every time you see the water's empty, you can go ahead and refill the bottom. So it's pretty much like bottom watering for those people who grow houseplants.
Yeah, that seems so much easier. And I was going to say that for pitcher plants, I've seen people with like kiddie pools of
Yep.
pitcher plants creating a little bog, but then we get a heavy rainstorm and it fills it all the way up with rainwater that the pitcher plants will actually start to rot in that
Yeah.
much water.
So if you are doing a setup like that, I always recommend people to drill holes in the side of their kiddie pool or whatever kind of vessel they're using. So if it does rain, it does have a little overflow system so it never fully floods all the pots.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip to kind of go up maybe 6 inches up the side or so
Yeah.
to make sure it drains, but
Hmm.
not in the bottom.
No, not in the bottom. You
You
want
do
there to
want
be
to sit.
some water.
Yeah, exactly. So, do they get planted in peat moss, soil, because they're bog plants? What type of medium do you use?
Yeah, that's a good question. For Venus flytrap, Sarracenium, pretty much all the temperate plants, I like to use, and you should use 100% organic peat soil. And I always say make sure it's 100% organic because I know Home Depot sells peat soil that says it's just peat. Then if you look at the ingredients in small writing, it says added nutrients. And with all these plants, you definitely do not want any nutrients in the soil. The fertilizer will kill the plants faster than hard water would. So make sure it's a 100% organic peat soil. And then we like to add some play sand, or you can get horticulture sand, but play sand's just as safe and it's a little bit cheaper. And you can add some perlite into it as well. There's tons of different recommendations if you go online, say carnivorous plant soil, which a lot of them work just as well. The main thing is just making sure you have no nutrients in that soil.
Yeah, it's such a great tip, Ethan, because so many of our potting mixes and soil mix come with additional soil moistener pellets, which
Hmm.
obviously not needed for this, or pre-fertilized pellets, slow release fertilizer, and that's obviously anathema for these carnivorous plants.
Yes.
So because they're not getting their nutrients from the water or the mix that they're planted in, I can kind of guess the answer that they're getting their nutrients from insects, and that's
Yes.
why they are carnivorous plants.
Exactly.
So I think that's kind of one of the myths about carnivorous plants too, is that they eat the insects. Can you describe kind of that consumption and use process of how they're using the insects for nutrition?
Yeah, so when they catch the insects, all the plants, for the most part, have the same type of fluid or enzymes that they'll release. Nepenthes, they're a tropical pitcher plant. The plant will make a little pitcher, and at the bottom of it, it will make its own fluid, which will it's kind of like the consistency of like spit or saliva. It's a little gooey, slight bit sticky. Venus flytraps will release that fluid once the trap is closed. And it's all pretty much the same, and they will pull out the nitrogen from the bugs. And then when they open up, the exoskeleton is still there and everything. But so they don't fully consume it, they're just pulling out all the nitrogen, what it needs from the bug's material.
And is it any bugs that would fall into the plants or specific insects?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much anything that's unlucky enough to fall into their traps, it will try to consume. An actual cool thing is with Nepenthes, the tropical pitcher plant, once they get of a very large size. So in the wild, on the Nepenthes, there's a little lid on top of it, and it will create its own little sugar substance, which has natural laxatives in it. And there's a little tropical mouse called a shrew mouse. And it'll go up and it'll lick the laxatives and it will poop into the pitcher, and the pitcher gets its nitrogen that way as well. But every now and then the mouse will fall into the pitcher and it can consume it. It'll just take it quite a while, but it'll get everything but the bones. And there's a nursery in California called California Carnivores. They're the biggest carnivorous plant nursery in the world. And he has a YouTube channel, and there's a few videos of him dumping out some Nepenthes, and some mouse bones fall out, and he talks about that and everything.
Well, I was thinking that the bones would be adding calcium, that they would be broken down too.
Yeah, they might be if it lasts long enough, but typically, if for at least for Venus flytraps and a lot of these other ones, if they do get a big catch like that, um, their enzymes that they put out do burn their cell walls and they'll turn black. So typically, those traps will die off much faster than one that hasn't caught anything yet.
Hmm.
But maybe if it didn't die off, those bones would eventually be broken down. But I think that the pitchers, after they catch a few things, they will die off, then new ones come out from the plant.
And almost all of these are perennial plants, correct?
Hmm.
So in the wintertime, do they kind of just dry up and fold up? What
in
happens
the
to them in the
wintertime, they go
winter?
dormant. They'll kind of die back to the ground. You might get some tiny little leaves, but as far as traps go, they don't make any more traps during the winter. And they kind of just stop what they're doing. They still do need water, the majority of them. And then in the spring, they'll send their flowers up first. Sarracenias will send up their flowers. And they typically do that because they don't want to hurt their pollinators. So they'll send flowers before their traps. And then a cool thing with Sarracenia, the first trap that comes out for the season will be the tallest one you'll get for the season, and the rest will be a few centimeters to an inch smaller. And then some people who do grow them inside under some good grow lights, they'll put them in their fridge for about 3 to 4 months. It's about the shortest amount of time they need for their winter dormancy. And then they'll take them back out and they'll start coming back to life or waking up.
Yeah, so they're just putting them into the early or kind of forcing them by doing that. And so you mentioned the flowers. A lot of people probably don't even know that carnivorous plants make flowers because they think, well, they're just consuming insects. That's what they do. But they're like other plants. They're making chlorophyll, right? They're creating seeds. Can you describe some of the seed propagation or other propagation techniques for the various carnivorous plants?
Yeah, so for my classes we teach, there's a sundew called a capensis. It's from the Cape of Africa. If people ask me, like, what's the first plant I should start with? I think the capensis is the funnest plant to start your journey with these plants. It's the most forgiving of environments and water and all that kind of stuff. They also are self-seeding, so they'll produce their own seed even if there's not another plant around. Their seeds are very small. They're about a little smaller than poppy seeds, but you'll get thousands of seeds. And if these plants were able to grow in any potting soil, these guys would be popping up in all of our plants here at Cultivate the City because these seeds get everywhere. And those seeds, since it's a tropical plant, they'll just fall right into the soil, and then in a few months you'll start seeing little babies pop up. With the temperate plants like Venus Flytraps and Sarracenia, they're a little bit harder because they need a winter stratification period, which means once they seed, those seeds need to sit in a cold period for same thing, about 3 to 4 months. And then once spring hits, they'll start to germinate and then come out. With most of these plants, they are very slow from seed, and it's a lot faster to propagate them if that's your goal, is just to make more plants.
And you mean dig and divide them?
Yeah, so like for instance, Venus flytraps come from rhizomes, and you can split their rhizomes and cut them up like that. And the best time to do that and to mess with any of the temperate plants is actually during the winter when they're dormant. They don't like their roots messed with. They don't like to be moved around too much when they're awake.
And for the pitcher plants, are they very easy to divide, the Sarracenas?
Yep, they also come from rhizomes. I'd say they're a little bit easier because those plants are generally bigger than a Venus flytrap. Their rhizomes are much larger. So you kind of just split them with the razor blade and make sure it's a clean blade. And then I kind of let them sit out for a few minutes, let it callus up, and then I'll go ahead and plant them back into some soil. And like I said, this will be in the winter when they are dormant. Venus flytraps, same thing. It's a little bit harder because they're smaller plants, so they're a little bit more delicate. But that's also the way a lot of people who sell these rare hybrids and stuff, that's the way they like to do it. Because getting them by seed just takes a really long time.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of the lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf, and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
What I bought? A new Blink Mini 2K Plus smart security camera. What I got? 2K clarity sharp enough to see every detail of home when I'm away. Plus audio like I'm in the room, not with my bestie traveling to another city. Plus easy plug-in setup to install faster than skipping through podcast ads. But you'd never skip ads, right? Plus, I got all of this for just $49.99. Blink Mini 2K Plus. Mini camera, max performance. Shop now at Amazon.com/Blink.
Now that you mentioned the rare hybrids, I know that pitcher plants have gone through a recent, I'm going to call it renaissance, with tons of people trying to do different cool patterns and breeding. So if you can picture the pitcher plants in your head, they kind of look like that open flute or clarinet, right? At the top.
Yeah,
but some have they kind of have like streaking and spots. What are the different ones that are being introduced now, Ethan?
Yeah, so a lot of them, there's a company called Red Leaf Exotics. I'd say he's the leader, at least in the United States, of selling these crazy hybrids. One of my favorites called Candy Dreams. It has a really big peristome, and the peristome is the lip around the opening of the pitcher plant, around the trap of it. And it's super flared out, and it almost looks like pinstriping like you'd see on old cars. Very ornate and very detailed and really bright colors. And also the cool thing with this, since these plants have gotten more popular, more people are creating these hybrids. Hybrid plants are a lot easier to grow than species as far as Nepenthes go. With Nepenthes, the species really like the exact kind of care and environment they have in the wild. With the hybrids, they're a lot more forgiving of the environment. You can kind of get away with growing them just in your house in normal house conditions.
Yeah, it's a concept of hybrid vigor that you hear about for tomatoes and other plants. It's usually the hybrid that's more disease resistant, makes more fruits or flowering, depending on what you want of the plant.
Yep. And another cool thing about these plants for the Nepenthes is the plants are either male or female. So it is a little bit harder to make your own hybrids. At Cultivate the City, we do a lot of our own Anthurium hybrids, which is a house plant. But with those flowers, the inflorescence, they go from female to male. In one plant, you have both. With these Nepenthes, you don't know what they are until they're pretty full grown. And then typically most of them are males. So female plants are harder to find. And if you are reselling and you have a plant in demand, they usually go for more if they are female for that reason.
And what is the pricing like for some of these?
For the Nepenthes, they be as cheap as if you get like a little baby, $25 to $40 for like the beginner ones, the ones you see in Home Depots and stuff. They're either Alata or Ventricosa are the names of those ones. Yeah, I think they're very pretty, but they are definitely more simple in the way they look compared to some of these crazier ones. And then there are some that go into the thousands, just like tropical aeroids and stuff. I feel like if there's people who collect it, the price is going to be higher.
Wow. I don't know about the thousands and risking that.
Yeah, I think I'd be a little nervous.
I would be very nervous. So let's go to the home gardener who wants to create a home bog garden. So they want to recreate that same type of bog that our native carnivorous plants will be growing in. And we talked about the kiddie pool example. Are there other examples that you do when you do the kiddie pool or other type of method? Do you sink it into the ground or let it rest on top of the ground?
You can sink it into the ground. The ones I've made for myself are above ground, just because I want the ability to move it easier if I had to. But yeah, I know people that have used the in-ground ponds you can get for koi fish. You can use those. I used a big horse trough I got from Tractor Supply store. I generally like to use containers that are plastic that are made to be outside. The first blog I made, I used a plastic bin that wasn't made for outside use all the time. So it dry rotted after the first couple of years and it kind of fell apart on me.
Yeah, we find that in water gardening a lot, that it has to be a material that the sun doesn't decay. So you have to have, sun kind of sun-proof plastic that doesn't tear apart that way, and that overwinters and it could freeze and crack if you just use like you said, a plastic tub or Rubbermaid
if the
crate or
soil
something like that.
expands.
Yep.
Yeah, so I recommend definitely something that's meant to be outside all the time, 24/7. And then, like we were saying earlier, I like to find bins that don't have any holes in the bottom, and then I'll drill my own holes about halfway up the container or somewhat like that, so it does have an overflow spot. And that way it creates its own little water table at the bottom of the pot, so it keeps the soil pretty wet. And I also tell people try to use a pot minimum 5 gallons, but I'd recommend even bigger than that. Because in the heat of our summers, if you have them in a small pot, you'll have to be watering it constantly. So the bigger the pot, the less care, is what I always like to tell people. So like the horse trough I have is probably, I don't know, maybe 20-gallon pot or so. And I water it maybe like in the heat of the summer. I have to water it like maybe 10 times throughout the full summer. Other than that, I kind of I'll weed it every now and then, but for the most part, I just get to sit and watch stuff grow and see the new things that kind of pop up.
And do you mix different carnivorous plants together or bog plants? What type of combinations are you doing?
Yeah, so I'll do Venus Flytraps and Sarracenia. I'll also do other bog plants. They're like bog orchids you can do. And with all these plants, at least for the carnivorous plants, people always ask, how closely can I plant them to each other?
Mm-hmm.
They don't compete for nutrients in the soil like other plants do, obviously, because they're carnivorous plants. So they do really well kind of crammed together in pots. You don't need to worry about them fighting for room underneath the soil. Most of their roots go straight down because they're looking for that water table. And then once they find the water, they kind of stop creating roots. So you don't really have that issue of being pot bound like you do with aeroids, because aeroids are constantly searching for more nutrients. These plants, really, the roots are there to anchor them down and then just find the water source.
Yeah, and I was reading up that even some carnivorous plants have no roots at all, like the utricularias.
Another good example are pinguicula or pings. They kind of look like little succulents in a way. They maybe have like 10 roots altogether, and all of them are about an inch long.
Mm.
So they really don't need a deep pot. Another cool way to grow them is on just pumice stone. In the wild, they'll grow on slate rocks kind of by waterfalls and such.
Wow.
So they really don't need the soil. They're just there to anchor themselves and pull in water.
It sounds like an ideal plant for those of us who are confessed overwaterers.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
You can
these
just
are great plants for that.
You can just let them sit in the water, but obviously have that, side drainage and make sure it's not too high on them. But a great alternative for those of us who love to overwater our plants. Just make sure it's the right kind of water, like we were saying.
Definitely.
And let's go through some of the other kinds of carnivorous plants out there. So we talked a little bit about Venus flytrap and pitcher plants, but we didn't talk at all yet about really sundew. So let's describe that for our listeners who have never seen a sundew before.
Yeah, so sundews, that's like the common name. The scientific name is Drosera. The most common one you'll probably see are Drosera capensis, like I talked a little bit about earlier, or Drosera spatulata. But they're typically little rosette plants, these little pads that kind of stick out in the air. And on the end of the pads, there's a bunch of little trichomes or hairs. And then on the very tips of those hairs, you'll see it almost kind of looks like little dewdrops. But once again, that's the liquid made by the plant that has the enzymes in it. So when bugs land and stick on those little pads, they get stuck from all the dewdrops. And the sundews themselves don't move so much to attack their prey, but the hairs will angle themselves towards it. There's a lot of cool videos online of like close-up pictures of flies getting caught, and the bug will pretty much be engulfed by all that sticky dew, and then it will break down and pull the nitrogen stuff out of the bug itself. Yeah, they're really pretty plants. They're pretty small, so if you don't have a whole lot of room for these big plants and just need something that stays small, sundews are a really good way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very pretty. They come in pinks, purples, green, and they're another misconception. A lot of people think the sundews need high humidity, which they don't. And a lot of people think the dew on the leaves and the hairs are from humidity. They think it's like dewdrops, but it's not. So I've seen some people who are getting started, they'll mist their sundews And that's not something you want to do because that will disrupt the natural liquid they produce, and they won't be able to catch and eat their prey that way. So it's best to not do that.
How about like handling, touching, petting your sundew or your carnivorous plants? Like I always see people poking at especially the Venus flytrap, the lip, trying to get the hairs to close.
Yeah. It's okay to do it every now and then, but it's not ideal. So for these plants to move the way they do, especially Venus flytraps, it takes a lot of energy from the plant to do that. And if you're making it close and there's nothing it's catching, it's pretty much wasting that energy. And if it's happening daily, say if you have kids, or I think at the National Arboretum, they used to have it so you can kind of get close to the plants. Now they have it a little more roped off. But if it's a plant that's being touched daily by people, it's most likely going to collapse within a few months because it won't be able to catch its prey and move when it actually needs to.
Mm.
One cool thing about the Venus flytrap is if you see one, you look very closely, there's 3 little hairs inside the mouth on both the upper and lower lids. Those hairs need to be triggered 3 times before the trap closes. And then after the trap closes, they need to be triggered 3 more times to ensure the plant that it caught its prey. And if it didn't, it'll open back up within an hour or so.
Good to know. Yeah, and I would think that this would take a tremendous amount of energy for the plants to be doing this. So constantly harassing it, we'll call it, is probably not the best thing. But I was also thinking about maybe the oils on our skin and touching them, because I know sometimes if you do that on some open orchids, that can make the flower drop off and not be good for the orchid flower. But have you seen that true for any of the carnivorous plants?
I don't know if it's with the oils, but I know with sundews, if you're rubbing them a lot, their little hairs, their trichomes on their pads are very fragile. And if you rip them out or bend them or disrupt them too much, that pad can no longer produce what it needs to catch its prey.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing if you're constantly touching it like that, the plant won't be able to eat and it will probably slowly start to decline.
Any other precautions for handling our carnivorous plants?
No, not that I can think of. Besides, if you're going to be handling temperate ones, best time to transplant and do all that kind of stuff, like I said, is in the winter when they're dormant. Mm-hmm. With all these plants, most of them, if not all of them, they don't like their roots messed with too much.
Yeah, it's especially if they have such small, short, fragile roots. I would think, there's not much there to hold them in. And so for the complete novice carnivorous plant grower, what would be your advice for what's the starter one?
I would say Capensis, the Cape Sundew, which is, I've seen them in some Home Depots. They're not as easy to find as Venus flytraps, but I'd say those are the best to start with. They're really forgiving of the water you use. So as I was experimenting and just watering one with just city tap water, and it did start to decline eventually, but it took about 3 months for it to start reacting to it. So if you're in a rush, you can use tap water, and then sometime, I'd say at least in a week, flush it out with rainwater. Your plant's definitely not going to be as happy, won't grow as nicely, but it is more forgiving of the water. And then, like I said, the Capensis, they self-seed, so that's a fun thing to do, is plant the seeds. You need to do no stratification or anything special to plant those seeds. You just throw them on top of some 100% organic peat, and within a few weeks to a month, you'll start seeing little babies pop up. And then you can also propagate them by cutting off their pads and floating them in distilled water. Within a few months, you'll see a bunch of little babies growing off those pads. And then you can take them and lay them on top of some peat soil, and they should root in, start growing. And then they also propagate from root propagation. So if you are handling them and you happen to break off some roots, you can usually get new babies off the roots as well. So I really like that plant because it's real forgiving and there's a lot of fun experiments you can do with it.
Yeah, it sounds like a really successful one with all those different ways to propagate it, and it'll be a little bit easier. And could that be one you could grow on a sunny, like south-facing windowsill?
Yeah, definitely. They grow pretty well inside really any windowsill. They don't need as much light as Venus flytraps do. I'd say at least 8 hours of some good sun is enough. If you have even the cheapest of grow lights, they'll do wonderful under grow lights. and they need no dormancy because they're tropical. So they're really straightforward, easy-growing plants, and they're great at catching flies, ants, mosquitoes, like those large ones. And speaking of that, that's a big question I always get: are do any of these plants catch mosquitoes? They can on accident, but mosquitoes are not drawn to these plants. Sadly, they won't help with
Yeah.
that.
I was going to say, they used to say, way back when, that was one of the ads for the Venus flytrap is, it would be a way to get insects or bugs out of your house. And I'm like, that would not be the most successful way of doing that.
No.
You would need a lot. You would need to line up all your windowsills, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll catch the occasional insect for you, but they're not going to go,
Yeah, they're not going to
clean up
change the
everything.
mosquito situation for you.
But it would be very satisfying to watch one devour, say, the Asian tiger mosquito would be fun. And another one that we should definitely talk about before we wrap up is the butterwort. Because first of all, I love that name, butterwort. It's just such a cutie. And if you're into succulents and have been collecting succulents for years as houseplants or in the garden, maybe some hardy succulents, it's so similar looking to the succulents, but it's not quite.
Yeah, they really are. So yeah, butterworts, pinguicula, or pings, they all go by that name. They look just like succulents. So if you're someone who loves succulents but tend to overwater, these would be the plants for you because they love the water. They like to sit in water like we were talking about. And they also propagate the same way succulents do. If you gently pull off the pad and you just lay it on the soil, they'll propagate that way. They're very slow at propagating, just like succulents, but that's an easy way to prop them. And they also get these really nice little purple or pink flowers that come up from them.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the photos of the peduncular flowers, and they look kind of like, I'm going to say, a violet, like a tiny violet, little purple violet being held above on a sedum. Like if you can imagine like a little tiny sedum on the surface, and they have really cool patterns to the sedums. Some are more like star-like, some are more like rosettes. Really cool, but I would be just in love if you could get them to bloom for you. Do you have any tips of getting the pings to rebloom?
Typically, if they're happy, they throw flowers all the time. Some species do more than others. A kind that we sell here are Morensis, and they typically flower quite a lot. But if they're a little upset, they won't throw flowers because, like all plants, it takes a lot of energy for them to produce their flowers. So if they're not getting what they need, you're not going to get the flowers.
And what are their ideal conditions?
So a lot of people think, once again, they like high humidity. I'd say out of all these plants we've talked about, they're the ones who do not tolerate high humidity well. They usually will get crown rot in super high humidity. So they like airflow. Your typical house condition is perfect. And then you can have them sitting in a little tray of water with about the same amount of light Capensis would get. So I'd say about 8 hours of a sunny window is perfect for them. And if you grow other houseplants and you have fungus gnats, these guys are amazing at catching fungus gnats. That is about all they'll catch because they're very small. They're dewdrops. So they can't catch any huge bugs because those bugs are strong enough to fly off their pads. But any tiny little fungus gnats, things like that, they'll catch like crazy, like little ants and things like that.
Sounds like an ideal houseplant. Especially because our homes are so dry in the wintertime.
Yep. And they won't get too big either. So if you're short on room, these are another great little gem to have to add to your plant collection.
And so wrapping up, I wanted to ask about, I've seen videos of pitcher plants where they've trapped an insect, maybe it's a large beetle or something, and that beetle has torn its way out. So I've read like myths or something that, they have some inoculants or something that knocks out the insect. That's not true. Right, the insect is alive and down at the bottom of the tube or trapped until it runs out of energy and kind of passes away.
Yeah, typically, there's nothing the plant does that knocks the bugs out. Typically, the bugs kill themselves by panicking and banging themselves all against the walls of these plants, or they drown in the sticky liquid at the bottom. But sometimes when I walk outside to my big bog, like in the spring, I hear a ton of buzzing and vibrating. It's really loud, and it's from the plants that have gotten stuck in the Sarracenia pitchers, which can be a little sad sometimes, a little morbid.
You said the plants that got stuck in.
Yeah, the bugs get stuck in. And actually, the good thing about these plants is they don't catch bumblebees or pollinators. It's typically wasps or ants, things like that. Another cool thing is with the Sarracenia outside, we'll make little tree frogs, those little peeper frogs, will make homes inside your pitcher plants at night. And that's another cool thing. So a lot of animals do utilize these carnivorous gardens.
But they're not getting, hopefully, the little tree frogs aren't getting stuck in the Sarracenia.
No, they don't get stuck and they don't get hurt. I think they have some kind of mucus on their skin that protects them, but they'll stay in the tops of them. So when bugs do come in, they pretty much get fed that way.
Yeah, I would think that would be a great place to hang out for a little frog.
And hummingbirds also love the flowers of the Sarracenias. So if you like hummingbirds, they're great. Those plants are great to add to your outside garden.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen the flowers of the pitcher plants or Sarracenia, they kind of hold above the pitcher plants, kind of on I would call it like a cane or a hook comes up, and it's a beautiful flower in itself.
Yeah, they kind of look like little lanterns almost.
Yeah,
they're probably one of my favorite flowers. They're beautiful flowers.
Yeah, I was going to say a combination of a lantern and a fortune cookie. Like they're kind of got that folded look to them. And because everybody thinks that the pitcher of the pitcher plant is the flower, and that is not the case.
Yeah, so the pitchers are just pretty much technically, I think they call them modified leaves. They're just
like
a leaf.
Rolled leaf.
Yep, that just is the trap.
Yeah, and if you look at it closely, you can kind of see that it's like a leaf that has a seal that it's together, and then the little tip, the cap that goes over it is just the bent part of the pitcher. So how can our listeners find out more?
Yeah, so you can, like I said, contact us through Instagram at Cultivate the City, Facebook at Cultivate the City, our website as well, Cultivate the City. And we have a bunch of pictures of some of these plants as well on our Instagram and Facebook. You can also contact me if you ever have any questions on my own Instagram, which is plan_4, like the number 4_plants. And I have some pictures of my bog on there and stuff and some other plants. But yeah, if you ever have questions or you ever bought carnivorous plants from us, I always tell people to reach out if you have any issues or any questions, because we're always happy to help. We want to let people know these plants aren't too hard to grow and they're not out of reach for people. I think they just start growing them and just make the two wrong mistakes of the wrong water and then fertilizing, and then they kill them and they get discouraged. But it's two really easy fixes, and then your plants will thrive.
I think a lot of listeners have probably been inspired to start a carnivorous plant collection or expand it if they already have carnivorous plants. So thank you so much, Ethan.
Thank you for having me.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the ingenious ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
I'm always looking for ways to show my cat how much I love her. And with Fancy Feast Gems, I can pamper her whenever I want with a savory gravy on top of a gourmet mousse pâté. The pyramid shape makes serving simple, so all I have to do is peel and plate to make mealtime feel extra fancy. And with 2 entrees in every pack, it's easy to turn every day into the extraordinary. Fancy Feast Gems.
Mexican bush sage plant profile. Mexican bush sage, Salvia leucantha, is a perennial plant that has long wands of bright purple and white flowers with a fuzzy, soft look. It's also known as velvet sage. It is native to Mexico and Central America. It is hardy to USDA zones 7 to 10 and is only marginally hardy in our region. In the mid-Atlantic, it blooms in late summer and early fall, giving great color and texture to the late-season garden until hit by a hard frost. It thrives on full sun and good drainage. Shear the Mexican bush sage a couple times during the spring and summer growth period to create a more compact plant, if desired. Mexican bush sage makes a great cut flower and is a favorite of various pollinators, including hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies. It's in the mint family, so it is deer and rabbit resistant. It is also drought tolerant. Mexican bush sage, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, I'm enjoying the plumes on my pink muhly grass, purple lovegrass, and little blue stem. At the garden plot, we're harvesting hibiscus calyxes and drying them to make tea. In the garden tips that we shared on social media this week, we focused on harvest time and frost protection, including the tip to protect your cauliflower heads from a frost by wrapping the outer leaves around them and securing them with string. In local gardening events, please note that the Garlic Fest at the U.S. National Arboretum has been delayed due to the federal government shutdown that might be rescheduled. Check the FONA.org website for updates. And then a couple upcoming events at Green Spring Gardens in Northern Virginia. One is on Saturday, November 15th at 1 p.m. Native Plants Tell Indigenous Stories. Join Smithsonian Gardens horticulturist Christine Price-Abelow for a fascinating lecture on the gardens surrounding the National Museum of the American Indian. Learn more about the carefully selected native plants, their cultural significance, and their stories. There is a fee of $15 to attend that, and you can register through fairfaxcounty.gov/parks/parktakes. And then on Saturday, November 22nd at 1 p.m., please join myself, Kathy Jentz, for a seasonal holiday plants and bulb forcing demo. I'll share my expert tips on nurturing holiday favorites and introduce a few unique plant varieties that make thoughtful gifts and charming additions to your home decor. We'll also learn basic bulb forcing techniques for coaxing spring bloomers into early bloom, brighten your home, and you'll be able to take a pot home with a bulb inside. You can register for that, which includes the plant supplies fee for $43 per person. Register at fairfaxcounty.gov. Thank you and happy gardening.
This is Christy Page with Food Gardening Network with How to Use Pumpkin in Unique Ways by Bill Dugan. It's getting to be that time of year when you try to figure out how to use pumpkin because your pumpkin patch is producing big time, or you have lots of pumpkins left over from seasonal decorating. And you've probably seen enough pumpkin pie and pumpkin muffin recipes, so here are some fun and unique ways to enjoy your excess pumpkin harvest. You don't want to just discard excess pumpkins into a landfill, and your neighbors have enough of their own pumpkins. So what is a savvy gardener to do? We've got you covered with a bunch of new ideas about using up all that pumpkin. Here are 7 fun and unique ways to use pumpkin this season, ensuring that you don't waste one bit of all that pumpkin you have. First, pickle your rinds. Who knew you could pickle pumpkin rinds? Say that 5 times fast. In that, it's so easy to do. When you pickle your pumpkin rinds, you can store them for later use on a fruit and cheese tray or have them on hand for tasty snacking at any time. Number 2, make your own pumpkin spice latte. Tired of paying the high price for a pumpkin spice latte at a gourmet coffee shop? Well, you can make your own for a lot less money and ensure that your drink actually has pumpkin in it. Here's the catch. Most coffee shop pumpkin spice lattes have almost no pumpkin. Number 3, try a bowl of pumpkin chili. Now don't turn your nose up at this. What could be better than enjoying chili on a cold fall or winter day? Chili that is flavored with complementary pumpkin flavor. Truly, this is an incredible recipe and you need to give it a try. 4. Make a batch of pumpkin butter. You've probably tried flavored butters before, perhaps with herbs or garlic or even apple butter. Well, use some of your excess pumpkin to make a batch of pumpkin butter that can be spread on crackers, bread, or toast. It can even be frozen for later use. Number 5, delight your family with pumpkin pancakes for breakfast. When you promise to make pumpkin pancakes for breakfast, your whole house will be getting up early to enjoy them. The smell is just terrific, and they are easy, healthy, and delicious. Number 6, consider feeding pumpkin to your animals. If you have a huge overabundance of pumpkin, consider sharing some with your dog. Even barn or yard animals such as chickens and pigs might enjoy pumpkin. Just be sure to check with your veterinarian before making changes to your pet's diet. And number 7, make pumpkin pie leather. This easy-to-make, kid-friendly snack is like dried fruit strips. And when you have lots of pumpkin to use, this is a great way to get the flavor of pumpkin pie and a munchable snack. Well, that's it. There's 7 unique ways to use pumpkin. What will you be trying this year? This has been Christy Page with foodgardening.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. This episode was made by real humans. It was produced and hosted by myself, Kathy Gents, with editing assistance from intern Cavett, Ireland. The Let the Sunshine music interludes are by James Mulvaney. If you like this episode, you may also enjoy listening to GardenDC Podcast Episode 14, Unusual Edibles, Episode 77, Goth Gardening, Episode 171, Murder in the Garden. By the way, you can become a listener, supporter, and subscriber. Find that link in our show notes. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Pinterest at WDC Gardener, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listening app. Please take a moment to share us on social media with hashtag GardenDC and with your gardening friends so other gardeners can find us too. My personal most frightening plant favorite is the black pearl ornamental pepper. It's grown for its glossy black foliage and its fruit that start off cherry red, then turn shiny black. No Goth garden should be without one. While it is beautiful to behold, you won't want to take a bite, or you are in for a horrible fright. Well, at least a most unpleasant experience of bitter and heat. Happy Halloween, everyone.